There is a perspective that we all need to arrive at, and I like to call it the magic wand insight, magic wand wisdom paradigm, which begs this question. If you were given a magic wand right now, how would you use it? Would you change anything in your life? Would you use it? My answer is always the same. No, I would not change anything. I wouldn't change who I was married to, despite the fact that I wound up getting divorced. I would not change getting divorced sooner so that I could have had a relationship with Mark. I wouldn't change anything. Do you remember the movie Back to the Future? Maybe you recognize this car. It's the DeLorean from the movie. Well, in the movie, Marty McFly went back in the future to when his parents were in high school. And by accident, his mother became infatuated with him, and he was not then interested in meeting his future dad. And his future changed so radically that when he looked at a picture of himself, it disappeared because he was never born, because he had changed his future by changing one small thing. Now, that's pretty extreme, isn't it? Like you erased yourself from your future. Or is it? Changing what happened in your past could have catastrophic consequences. And now I've never had a life altering physical ailment or had any number of conditions that caused pain. So I do understand how there would be people who would absolutely wave a magic wand to reverse a paralysis or to bring back a child or a spouse or a parent. I actually pray that we can never wield a power like that here on earth. But changing anything that has previously happened in your life would alter your experiences in some unknowable way. And you would not be who you are at this moment. Now, I personally have done a lot of work on myself to become who I am today. And since I like who I am, imperfections and all, I would not change a thing. The caveat might be that you would not use the magic wand to change anything if you actually liked who you were, loved who you were on a soul level. And maybe your answer is different if you don't feel that way about yourself. I want to share this story, this really cool story. It's a near death experience from Peter Panagori. And he died of hypothermia when he was like 17 years old, 19 years old, went to the other side. And he was able to look over and peer into the earth. And he said, from this perspective, he could see every single person on earth. He could perceive every moment that they ever lived in their entire life. And then he could use this kind of laser vision to actually change his perspective and move into seeing one particular person on earth. And he looked at his parents and he saw that because they had already lost one child, that his death caused a catastrophic change in his parents' life because he was not going to be alive. And usually when somebody has a near death experience, they're told you can't stay, it's not your time. But he was told by God in this perspective that it was his time. But he said, I can see what not living my life is going to do for my parents. Please, please, please let me go back. And God said, are you sure? Because if you go back, your life isn't going to be the same. And he said, yes, I'm sure I want to go back. And then all of a sudden, he said he was shown this image. So he said, picture the blunt end of a cable, like a cable that would hold up the bridge. And the cable would be comprised of many, many, many single wires, all strung together to create this bigger blunt end of this cable. So he said, from this vantage point, looking at this cut end of this cable, he said that you would see maybe like 100 little individual wires. He said, now take that vantage point, that viewpoint, and make it like a million points of light And he said this was his life, and this was his contract for his life. And he said any single one of those entry points is a place that he could enter into his life. And depending on which strand he picked, his life would be completely different. And he didn't know what to do. And he sat there and he picked one spot that was slightly off of the very, very center of these cables, these points of light. And he picked that, and his body was drawn in, and he was then put back in his body, and he lived and didn't die from the hypothermia. But he said, picking this different vantage point completely changed everything about his life. But the biggest thing it changed was the fact and the knowledge that he knew about and remembered his experience from the other side. And as a result, he felt like he didn't want to be here on earth anymore because the existence on the other side, the love he felt on the other side was so strong and overwhelming. And he said he spent every single day of his life from that moment forward wishing that he would die. He knew he couldn't commit suicide because he knew that that would cause and alter things in a different way that he wasn't willing to do to himself. But this perspective change changed everything about how his life was, and he almost wished that he had never come back. So this is a very, very extreme example of how you would make a change and it could catastrophically change your life. Okay, I'm going to share one more story, and that is I saw an interview of this 14-year-old boy who was suffering from sickle cell anemia. And every 3 months for his entire life, he had to go to the hospital and have his blood supply completely replaced so that his body would have the proper oxygen levels for him to live. And he was asked his opinion on the ability to genetically change the gene in an embryo that would eliminate this disease. And his response really surprised me. He said, I guess that's kind of cool that they're thinking that they could do that in the future, but that decision should be left up to the kid later. There's a lot of things I learned having sickle cell because I had it. I learned patience. I learned to be positive. He was then asked if he wished he had never had it, and he said, I don't wish I had never had it. I don't think I'd be me if I didn't have sickle cell. Ah, from the mouth of a 14-year-old, what wisdom and what an example. And truth, truth, truth. This does not mean that you don't have to regret things that have happened in your life. This doesn't mean that you don't wish that you could have done something differently or made better choices. It just means that you're an old soul or an evolved soul who understands if you like who you are now, then changing anything would not let you be the you that you are at this moment.